Record. Hello, people watching on record. I am your host, Jon Anderson. Alex is here, but doing a terrible job of being the host and the boss. So
thanks, John. Take it away.
We are absolutely going to keep this under 50 minutes here. It's 9:10 right now. I'm here to talk about data. I'm the data guy. In this case, it'll be simple Excel pivot tables and what is called DataWrapper, which is a website which lets you generate interactive charts, tables, data visualizations that you can embed directly into RotoBaller posts, which in my opinion, there are some things with, I think Alex said, maybe with some search engine stuff that they're not quite optimal for, but yeah, as you'll see, they certainly look a little bit better and give you a lot more options on what you can do. So we'll start with a pivot table. So this is a large Excel sheet here, right? What you're seeing here is one that I make myself. I can make it available to anybody. It is already available. There's just a Google Sheet link that you can have to download this every week. It's updated Tuesday mornings by me. What it gives you here, it's important to understand what we're looking at first, and then the pivot tables will make a little bit more sense. But the problem with the big data world, this is hardly big data considering what big data means, but even this file here has one row per someone's played every week. One row for each player for each week they played. So you see here's Antonio Gibson's season, 13 weeks, 13 rows. Don't do that. So that manifests itself in having 3,907 rows with 39 data attributes, data columns, stats, whatever you'd say. Do the math. That is way too many numbers for the human brain to look at in this form. So what we can do is use the pivot table. The insert button. This is all replicable on Google Sheets. It will not look like this. If there's time at the end and people want to, I can maybe try to replicate something quickly in Google Sheets, because I know a lot of people probably do work that way. But we'll go from here. It's best just for everybody to get the idea of what it is, so you know that it's an option, and then you can kind of move forward. You're not going to come out of this session busting out pivot tables if you have no experience with them before, but it's just good to know what's possible, what's out there, and then you can chase it down further yourself. Yeah. So creating a pivot table, it will just default to, it says, what data do you want to use? The default is almost always right because it just selects the whole table range. So that's fine. Now it gives us this blank, confusing looking screen. So what it's going to say here is we have four options. We have filters, we have columns, we have rows, and we have values. I'm just going to show one, and then the stuff will start making more sense. So right now, the example I've just come up with is that we want to see each wide receiver's targets per week and how that progression has gone. I think this is something that a lot of fantasy players are interested in. So we're going to put player in the rows because we want one row for each player. The values is going to be what you're actually, the stat you're looking for, per se. So in my data, it's called TGT for targets. What it does here is it doesn't automatically, it defaults to summing them up. So as you saw before, Antonio Gibson had 13 rows. This will just say, it's the same as doing this. It's the same as putting a filter on, saying, find all the rows with Antonio Gibson, and then take the sum of his targets. It just does that automatically, right? So if you find Antonio Gibson here, it took his name, every row with his name, and it summed up that target column, 36. Now, that's not too impressive. But the next thing you can do is you can add a columns value. And So we'll slap the week. So this is week number, NFL week number, right into the columns. That divides them, that splits the targets up into those 13 rows. So it says, okay, there's 13 rows with Antonio Gibson's name on them. And there were 13 different values in the week column there. So let me put those ones across the top and the names across the running down, and we'll show all the targets that way. So what you're seeing now, and let's just keep using that same example. We'll search him here. It makes it kind of ugly here. This isn't a good thing for display, but anyway, this is a good way to just get the data and then clean it up later. So right here, you see Antonio Gibson's targets of each week this year. Problem is right now that there are a million players here because this is everybody in the data. One thing you can do then is add filters. I have a position attribute in the data. Every player has their affiliated position right next to them. This is where we can go ahead and just show me the wide receivers. So you see a bunch of names popped off there. This is only showing players listed as wide receiver. Again, you're not going to take a screenshot of this, and feel free to stop me at any time if anybody has any questions or anything like that. You're obviously not just going to like take a screenshot of this and throw it into a RotoBaller post, right? This is very ugly. So what we want to do is let's make it, let's give ourselves a little bit less data to work with. We'll put a team filter on and we'll pick a team. Who's a favorite NFL team here? I'll just pick one. Why not? Let's go to I guess I'm a Pittsburgh guy, but I've just been, I've kind of gravitated towards the Bills in the last couple of years. So there you go. That cuts down their targets to these 7 names. Still not that pretty. One thing we can do, I'm going to get to the DataWrapper website, which I think is the most useful thing in this session for RotoBaller writers. But quite cool thing Excel does is it gives you the pivot chart. So watch this. With one button click here, well, more than one, you can turn this table into a graph. Just like that. Now this is ugly because it has the axes flipped. I don't want the player names on the x-axis. I want those being the lines. We don't have to spend time on this, but we'll just go ahead, flip those axes. That goes ahead and shows a line for every player. Gabriel Davis, doesn't that guy have more than 0 targets? Whatever, my data might not be exactly correct, but so you see Stephon Diggs is the dark blue line, and there you go. I mean, this is closer to something you might be able to tweet out or show or whatever.
Yeah.
Screenshot it and go from there. So that's something cool to turn your pivot table, the ugly raw numbers, into something visual. All right. Undo that stuff to flip the axes back and then just delete it. So, I mean, as you can imagine now, if you have a good data source, that was targets per week. I mean, we can do all kinds of other stuff. And if you can think of it, we can probably do it, but we'll move on from there. So now I want to do, we're going to do another pivot table, and we're going to then save the data off, and we're going to make an interactive chart with it. And we'll do 2 charts to show one table and one, I'm going to do a scatter plot because you'll see the different options we can do. Stuff that really, I think, pretties up and makes our articles and posts a little bit more interesting. And, you know, it's always good to have a visual in the middle of all your text. So we'll start it over again. We have our blank pivot table. I'm going to do targets per game over the last 5 weeks. So this will be like a leaderboard. We'll see who has the most targets per game in the last 5 weeks. The one trick here, as same thing here, get each player, get each sum of the targets. This time we're going to make week a filter. Instead of making it the columns, we're just going to select the last 5. So now this is just telling it from that table, hey, only look at rows where the week is 9, 10, 11, or 12, or 13. So this is raw total of targets. We can sort it here just like this to show who has the most. Problem is that there's an inherent bias here because Cooper Kupp has definitely had a bye week in the last 5. And certainly some of these other names have not. Stephon Diggs has not. I don't have like a games played column here though. That's the problem is that I could put a column in here with game played 1, 1, 1, just make it 1 every time to just so you can sum that up. But we don't have to in this case because there's the count function. So what we can do is pick any field and put it here as well. So the team field is text, right? It's a team abbreviation. You can't sum it. So it will default to the count option. So this is just going to say for Deontay Johnson in these selected weeks, how many times has his name or how many times has his row shown up, and that will effectively show me how many games he's played. In my case, if the player didn't have a catch or if he didn't have a pass attempt, a rush attempt, or a target, I think it doesn't show up in the data at all. So you can see this works for Cooper Kupp. He had that bye week. He only has 4 counts. So we can just rename this right from the jump, call it GP. So that will give us what we want. This is the leaderboard we want. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to put this leaderboard into a new sheet that we're going to upload to the website DataWrapper. So quick copy paste. We'll rename our columns. We could put the teams in here with a VLOOKUP. Yeah, sure. Why don't we do that? Since this is being recorded, if people want to learn VLOOKUPs, they can watch this again and see what I did. So to do the quick team lookup, I'm going to make another table in a separate tab. All I did was copy the player name and team columns. And now I can go in here and say, hey, look up the team, look up Deontay Johnson's name in this table, give me the result of the second column, and put that false flag in to specify what kind of match. Not worth the time. Copy that down. There you go. You have your team names, just like that. Now I'm going to paste. Right now, this is a result of a formula. I don't want that. I don't want to take this with me. I'm going to go copy paste. Just paste the values. So now this value actually says BAL rather than that VLOOKUP, and we can go ahead and delete this sheet. So VLOOKUPs, that's a super important Excel thing to know. If you're trying to learn Excel, that's going to be one of the things that you'll want to learn, and very simple. If that looked intimidating or whatever, it really was not. You can get those with just 10, 20 minutes of practice. All right. Now we probably don't want to show a leaderboard of 477 names, right? We can probably go ahead and safely get rid of some of these names, but first let's do our target per game calculation. Easy math. Targets divided by games. No problem. Let's make them all have 1 decimal. And now let's just get rid of anybody so here's your new leaderboard. Let's get rid of anybody who doesn't have 3. So we'll filter to show me everybody that has less than 3 targets per game. Highlight all those rows, delete. Cool. Here's our leaderboard. We're ready to send it to DataWrapper. First, we have to save the file. DataWrapper depends on Excel files. You can also use other, you can use Google Sheet URLs actually, and a bunch of other cool stuff, but this is the easier way to do it. So after my work G drive, so that's not what we want to do. This is a work computer, so don't tell anybody. All right. So I saved that file to my desktop, right? I did it, yeah. The website is, if you just go to DataWrapper.de, I believe that's Denmark. This is a website hosted in Denmark. Works great in the US though. So you either put app.datawrapper.de or just datawrapper.de, or certainly if you just Google DataWrapper, it's the first result. So you will need an account, free account, no problem. Create new chart is where we're going from here after you have your account. First thing it's going to ask you is what, give me the data that you want me to display. Excel upload option. It takes it in. There's my data looking in the same Excel format. And we'll go to the Visualize tab next. And here's where you get to pick your visualization type. Defaults to this dumb line graph, which looks terrible. Doesn't make sense for our purposes here. Let's do a table. And here you are. So pretty ugly table, but this is when we start cleaning it up. We'll say targets per game, leaders, last 5 weeks. The refine tab is where we really do all the work here. So the cool part about this, and this is super useful for when you want to show a table of like more than 10 people. The RotoBaller HTML tables, which is probably what you've used or what an editor maybe turned yours into. They look pretty good, honestly. They do a good job. I think the WordPress team set up a nice like JavaScript or CSS setup, so it puts a nice little header on it and stuff, and it doesn't look too bad. But once you start getting into like, I want to show 25, 30 players, that's like super long, right? And then you get into that scrolling and it gets kind of ugly. So what one of the cooler parts about this is you can make it paginate. So I can turn this into 13 pages. Actually, so I just want to show, let me show 10 results at a time. So that'll make it 19 pages because I have 180 some names here. Again, this is probably bigger than you really want to do. So maybe we should have made that targets per game be greater than 5 rather than greater than 3 or something like that. But but this is a good start and a good example. You can also make the table searchable with this button. So you can go ahead and say, I don't know, Marquise Brown, or everybody, nice search. You can search for the Rams. Problem with that is Tony Pollard actually has an LAR in his name. So not perfect, but searching the team abbreviation will show you that. So things like that. And then we can like clean them up. You can format. I like to center things. You can change the number format here. I'll show that 1 decimal, et cetera, et cetera. All of these columns will automatically be sortable. You can get rid of that though. You can go to each column and say, hey, don't make this sortable right here. Blah, 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 blah. Not going to go over all the functionality in here, but this is something, if you're going to try this, go ahead and mess around with stuff and show 1 column as a heat map to show like that, stuff like that. I like to just quickly make the header different format, and there's my table. So I like this. This serves its purpose. And then we go to the publish embed. Publish now.
Nice.
And then you will just copy this directly into the HTML tab of your.
Yeah.
So I publish this every week with a bunch of these tables. It's kind of just a massive dump post where I try not to comment because I'm not a football guy, but so in the text tab, you'll see this is where you'll just go ahead and throw that right in like that. And here you have it. It'll show very nicely there. So any kind of data you want to show, clean it up, you can make it in here, and it just displays a lot better because you can control the height and the width and make it searchable and all things like that. One more thing I had on my list here, and I mean, I could talk for hours about stuff we can do with all of this Excel and business, but I'll show one more DataWrapper example. I want to show a scatter plot just to show that this is more than just a table generating tool. So let's go ahead and close this. So I couldn't think of anything great. I know for baseball, I like to show the relationship between two statistics. So I often show the relationship of strikeout to walk ratio against ERA. It turns out that strikeout to walk ratio predicts your ERA pretty well. So it's fun to put the scatter plot there to show, hey, this pitcher had a 5 strikeout to walk ratio, which is really good, and his ERA was here, and then plot 100 pitchers like that to show the relationship, and that'll make more sense as I show this. The one thing I thought of for football, maybe that was interesting, I don't know if this will be, but it'll prove the point, or it'll make our example, is I want to see which players, I want to see each player's reception yards for the year against their air yards. So that'll be kind of interesting if someone has high air yards and low reception actual yards. What would that mean? I guess they're running a bunch of deep routes and have a bad quarterback or something, or maybe they've been
One of the things.
Yeah, it could be just bad luck or that kind of route tree or whatever you football guys call it. So this will be a real simple pivot table first, but that's what I have to do. I have to transform my big ugly data into just showing these two stats. So I want to see reception yards and I want to see air yards. And there we have it. And again, let's get rid of the quarterbacks and running backs. All running backs have like negative average depth of targets usually, so we don't really care about them. So let's stick just the tight ends and wide receivers with that filter again. And there we have it. Okay, so now this is 358 players. Well, not quite 354 or so. So a lot, but it's good because we're not publishing a table. Nobody wants to see a table of 350 rows. But a scatter plot is nice because it shows the relationship and highlights the leaders that you want by hovering over. So you'll see, again, new file, change the column names, reception yards, or I'd say actual yards, maybe air yards. Well, it probably makes more sense just to put reception yards. People, that makes more sense to people. Save it. Stop right there. Air yards versus yards. Okay, now we have our data. Back to DataWrapper again, create new chart, pick your data, let it upload. So if we choose table there, we'll see the same thing we were just looking at, but here we're going to choose a scatter plot. And we'll name it air yards versus reception yards, 2021 NFL, whatever. We're fine. So this is good. It actually did default. It kind of knew what we were going for. I put air yards in one column and reception, or on one axis and reception yards on the other. So you can see the dots hovering up. So you see a pretty linear relationship. If you drew a line directly through all these points, they would be going pretty much straight up with a slope of 1, if you remember your algebra class. So that's a pretty good relationship, basically saying as you get more air yards, you will also get more reception yards. Very obvious, easy to predict, but this right now, if you hover over these dots, it's not showing you anything. So the kind of the point of this would be to show which players have stranger outcomes or more unexpected outcomes. So here we add a labeling and we'll put the player as the label. I don't want to do the automatic. All right, so since we selected the player column to do the label, as we hover over every single dot, it'll show you. Let's also put in the trend line. Just a nice show trend line button there. You can change the colors of the dots if that tickles you. You can also, oh, that's a cool thing to show. What can we do? Yeah, okay, so if you're trying to showcase one player, all right, so say that, so who's the furthest away from the trend line is Debo Samuel. So he's at about 1,000 receiving yards with just 800 air yards, meaning most of his production is after the catch. Does that make sense? He's taken a lot of those like slants long ways, right? So say that that's the point we were trying to make. Like, look, he's done all his damage with long yards after the catch runs. Maybe that's not sustainable. We can go ahead and find his name here and just add, where are you? So that just shows on the plot automatically. You can also like you can draw an arrow on it too, or circle it, or whatever you want. And this kind of just will pop to make your point. But still, as people hover over the dots, they'll see the names. So on the other side of the line, really the furthest dots away from the line are the outliers: McLaurin, Cortland Sutton, all these deep route guys that kind of run deep and get most of their yards before the catch. So there, that's a cool example. Same thing from here. Publish and embed. Publish. There is your embed code ready to go. You can also save it as just a image file. Like for this one, if you were really just writing a post about how Debo Samuel might be due for regression, I don't know if he is, whatever. Maybe you wouldn't need to embed the interactive table here. You can just let it download a PNG file and put this right in your post. I'm sure everybody's familiar with that. Here's your nice image file. And each one gets their own URL that you can just, if you wanted to tweet out and say, here, check this out, just at a web page, however. So insanely useful tool, DataWrapper. Many more uses than what I just showed. But I would say I'm not in charge, but if you need to put a big table of data or some kind of data visualization into your post, I think DataWrapper will most of the time look better, feel better, and be more interesting for the reader. So if you can kind of familiarize yourself with this and get a little bit more skilled at it, I think that's good. Again, I mean, I guess Alex knew I was going to show this, so he doesn't have a huge problem with it, but we did talk a little bit about some issues with SEO. And also sometimes Pierre has been editing my weekly posts, and a lot of these times the code breaks in the actual post once it sits and submitted for a while, I guess, or something happens, the code changes. So then I have to come back in here. And the cool thing is it archives everything you do. So I can just go find, like I had to go find the embed code for this one again and put it back in, and they're all here forever. So
Hey John, there's 1 minute left in this session because Zoom limits to 40 minutes. And
okay, well, that's everything I wanted to show. So I think we're good for the recording. Reach out to me if you have any questions. My email's in the emails you got. So everybody watching this on recording, just give me a shout if you need anything else. But we can keep talking on the live call, but I don't think we need to extend the recording. So, although we're all going to shut down, aren't we?
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I actually sent out a new link. So
okay,
why don't we hop on that one for a second? We can stop the recording and we can just do like a Q&A there, and I can talk to the couple things you brought up about like embedding it in the post also.
Cool.